Nerdlab Games and the creator of Magic the Gathering present the newest Mindbug experience, Beyond Evolution, and even beyond eternity.
Hello, fellow adventurers, and welcome back to the Nerdlab, where we transform our gaming passion into incredible game designs and learn how to nerd like a boss. My name is Marvin, and I'm an ambitious game designer on my quest to develop different card games and publish them with Nerdlab Games. For this podcast, my vision is to take you with me on this exciting journey. Together, we will explore the secrets of different game mechanics and reach the next level as a game designer. And today we have the game design team of Mindbug again, talking about our first steps in the in creating the first expansions for Mindbug. So we want to talk a little bit about how those expansions came to be, what were our initial ideas about those expansions, and maybe also some of our struggles and what we like and really enjoy about them. So maybe like a 10-15 second introduction of everyone, so that people who are maybe new to the game know how we came together and who you are. So do you want to start, Christian? You are on top of my screen, so...
Sure, happy to. So I'm Christian Kudahl, located in Denmark. My background is as a computer scientist, but now I'm doing a lot of stuff with the games, and especially here with Mindbug. It's been quite a journey to get these two expansions ready to show you guys, so we are pretty excited to talk about it.
And I really like your the images in the back of your
room. Thank you. Yeah, my wife had them made for me and surprised me with them, so I was very nice to be able to look at stuff like this every day.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction. Richard, do you want to go next?
Sure. Richard Garfield, been game designing for 30 years now, I guess. Professionally for 30 years, and joined this project after seeing the brilliance of the Mindbug concept, and have been enjoying playing and developing the game ever since.
Thanks a lot. Skaff, you are up.
Oh yeah, I have been following along with Richard for something like close to 30 years, and so I was with him in Three Donkeys, and then he was the one that first saw Mindbug and brought it to my attention, and it's just such an awesome game and project to work on. So we jumped in immediately.
Thanks a lot. So the initial starting point was a very successful Kickstarter campaign last year, and ever since we've seen a lot of interest from people and our fans in the market to create new and more Mindbug cards. So this was a challenge I don't know exactly when, but probably around a year ago or so, started to think about how we could move on from this first set, this first contact set that we created. And maybe Christian, you can tell us a little bit about our first steps with talking about an expansion.
Yeah, sure. So from the people playing the game, they often went through this journey of they played it, they really liked it, then they came back 2 days later and were like, okay, I played it 20 times, when can I have more cards? And we were like, we're working on some stuff, but so I think in a game like this, it's quite clear that when people like it, they often would like to have more cards. And because Mindbug is not a trading card game, but it's this thing where, our original vision was just kind of you buy this box and then you have all the cards. You have to think a little bit about, okay, so how exactly do we introduce new cards? And the model we've kind of, there are different possibilities. So what we landed on is to have, to do sets that are standalone expansions. So you buy a new box that is the size of the original one, has the same number of cards, and you can play within that box. We ensure that box works very nicely within itself, but that you are, of course, also able to mix that stuff with all your other stuff. So going forward, when this pool of card grows, we see some quite interesting potential. There's a bit more room for an exciting draft or putting together your own set or stuff like this. I think we are a little bit inspired by Dominion in this regard. At least that's how I think. So when Dominion put out a new box, they say, okay, here's a nice box with cards that sort of have this general theme. But if you're into mixing it all up, you can certainly also go in that direction.
Absolutely, yeah. So at some point in time, we also had to discuss how many cards would go in such a standalone expansion. So what did you guys like about the size that we have at the moment with these 52 cards in a set? Richard, do you have an idea of what you like about the size of the set, or maybe some of the reasons why we sticked with it?
Yeah. Well, with these sorts of games, you're always balancing having a sense of flavor and something you can learn about versus variety. And the size of the deck we've got was chosen, and the number of duplicates we've got there because we do duplicate some of the cards. Uh, these numbers were chosen so that you had a lot of variety, and yet you felt like you weren't completely at sea, and it wasn't just a random set of stuff every time you played. Uh, um, and so you could had you had the capability of mastering the environment a little more, and so that's the balancing act we chose. These are the numbers that came up, and I think they're pretty strong. I'm sure that we will see players just shuffling everything together, and that'll be fine. And if they shuffle everything, if they either choose a set of say 40 or 60 cards, then they can get that sense of mastery with their own combinations. But if they shuffle everything together, they can embrace the less predictable but more variety, which is a matter of taste.
I'm totally the player who wants to shuffle everything together, and in 5 years I want to have a stack like this that takes me 30 minutes to shuffle to play a 5 minute game. I think it's a kind of matter of player type. Some players really like this, as you mentioned, Richard, like mastering the environment that they're in.
I'm totally
Yeah.
the other opposite. I really like mastering an environment, and I think that's the size of our sets are just perfect for that. You can really play it a couple of times, and you find you immediately start to find the first and well working combos in there and cards you maybe like, and try to figure out some strategies how to maximize the effect of those cards by combining them with other cards. And even if you play it like 50 or 100 times, it still has enough depth to surprise you sometimes. And I'm just really surprised of how much depth and also kind of well easy learning those this size of the deck we have at the moment delivers.
Yep.
Yeah, so
You
go ahead.
I mean, you mentioned Dominion, and that's in some ways embraces the best of both worlds because Dominion, for me, the single best characteristic of Dominion is that you choose your 10 action cards and you play with them, and that gives you your environment. And so it does have the sense of mastery and yet the sense of variety, regardless of how you embrace it. Uh, Another game I like a lot is Ascension, and Ascension. It it's which is a game I love, but you start shuffling all the decks together, and it becomes more and more the same. It's just random stuff. But if you take one or two or three of the sets and you play with that, I don't know. There's a lot more character, um, and I think we're more like Ascension. So yeah, I'm a little. I would probably lean towards playing with a subset of cards, but I would vary that.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
goes a
you
bit
can
into
pick.
the direction that we talked about some time ago, that we want to encourage at some point in time, once we have enough cards to choose from, to encourage people to come up with their own little cubes or environments that they create from all the cards that are available, choose a subset, and enjoy that. So we maybe see in the future a set that someone created of all the cards we have designed, that, I don't know, has a lot of hunters in there because those people really like the hunters in the game and want to hunt each other. And I would totally enjoy figuring out that specific kind of environment, because I would have to evaluate cards completely different.
Yeah, the cards are going to be worth. They're going to be serve a very different purpose, and they're going to be worth different amounts depending upon what environment they're in. And that's part of the cool thing about picking, two sets as your environment is how that changes the value of the individual cards and how you
Yeah, and it's
the game.
it's a quite cool idea that I could put together this environment at home where I kind of know the secrets to that environment. That usually it's this guy you should look for, but here it's really these two that are normally not so scary. But here there are just no counters to those, so I know those are really good mindbug targets. If
Yeah,
I want to annoy my friends, at least.
and you can do that sort of thing even without two sets. Richard has played a lot of games the following way, and he suggested even with this is if you take two copies of say one of the expansions and mix it together, and then deal a random half of it out, that's pretty interesting all in itself. And again, completely different environment because it might be missing something. It might have a lot more of a certain thing in it than you thought it would, and yeah, it's pretty neat to play that way as well.
It was one of our early discoveries in development was how some cards being duplicated really add to the environment. Other ones not so much. But you come into this thing of we came in with this attitude of if you just have all the cards appear as singles, that is going to be the best quality, the most variety and so forth. But then two killer bees, that is interesting at sort of another level. It's like how many killer bees can you have would make the environment the most interesting? And the answer is not one. And
I mean,
so I,
probably there's a point where the curves starts to go down again when you just add in killer bees.
yeah, yeah. But some cards are more interesting, or I shouldn't say more interesting. Their interest changes with having more.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting comparison with Ascension, and I think it probably touches on like how you design the cards. So if you design a set so that it's highly synergistic within itself, you can get some really cool and different experiences. But it also will probably make it a bit less exciting to mix stuff, since the stuff that then synergizes, you'll get those synergies a bit less often. Whereas if you lean the other direction and try to design cards more general, you might feel a less special experience within the set, but maybe have a better experience mixing them.
Yeah, yeah. And so that led to us trying to make them standalone so people could mix and match with the best quality, but still not leaving, still doing cards which fit very well with the set we're working on, even if they weren't necessarily going to be more broadly useful.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and let the players be judges of how well we accomplished each of those things.
Sure. And, remember, also, it works the other way as well. There's some cards. This is pretty common, like in the Boost expansion. There's some cards that are much better when they're not mixed with other cards in their own expansion, which sort of holding them in check. So
Yeah, so I mean, their power level can grow a lot.
actually increase, yeah.
So diving into the specifics, so in the Boost expansion, there are a bunch of cards that provide quite powerful abilities while they're in your discard pile, but the expansion also comes with a lot of ways of removing them from the opponent's discard pile. So certainly those cards will go a bit up in power value when you just mix all your stuff together. You'll have to be quite wary of allowing the opponent to put something like that in the discard pile.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that already describes what you described, Christian, is already describing a little bit the difference between the two expansions we came up with, because I think the Beyond Evolution expansion is the one that has maybe more generic cards, which I don't mean negative in any way. It's just I think it's easier to mix and match them with other cards. While the Beyond Eternity, the Boost expansion, it has more cards that maybe require each other to be to get to their full potential, because you really one example is that we have a lot of cards that care about specific power values. For example, that you want to have two creatures that have the same power value also, and with the boost mechanic you can manipulate that by yourself, so it feels like you have more like these smaller steps in your strategy of cards that work well together to achieve something greater. While the Beyond Evolution expansion is more like each card is super powerful and strong on its own and can swing the entire game. So I actually think they play very different, the two expansions, but I like both aspects of it.
I think you're right that the Beyond Evolution is more like a bunch of cool cards thrown together. So maybe just for the viewers, we should describe a bit more in general. So you talked about the boost expansion. So in the boost expansion, we have cards that allow you to boost, which is a new mechanism, which means taking a card from either discard pile, sliding it on that card in play face down, and it provides a +1 in power value. So this does some different stuff that's quite interesting. So you can both use it to make your card stronger, of course. You can also use it to take cards out of your opponent's discard pile that provide strong abilities while they are in the discard pile. And then we have a bunch of cards that care about the power values of cards, as you say. So trying to get two cards of the same power value because it provides you some benefit, you can do that with the boosting. Boost your 4 to a 5, and now you have two 5s, and you get to do something cool. So just as a bit of background, so this is the boost mechanism, and it was. I mean, you can say if you disagree, but my feeling is it was something that was quite hard to get to work well, actually. So in Mindbug, I think it's not so hard to come up with a bunch of fun cards and stick them all together, but having this kind of overall thing going on in the set requires some finesse, because this boosting thing, basically you want a certain amount of it for it to be interesting, but if you put in too much, then you don't have enough cards in your discard piles to actually be able to boost stuff. So all your cards will not do anything. And sort of getting this balance right, getting stuff that interact with it in interesting ways, but also work out when there's no boosting cards. I thought that was a real challenge. What do you guys think?
Yeah, certainly. In some ways, that comes up a lot with my approach to game design, which is try everything and hone it down. And I think we did a lot of that there. We had a lot of ideas which were ended up on the cutting room floor, and but yeah, there was definitely several iterations where it felt like you have all these cool mechanics, but you can't use them because you don't have enough fuel. You don't have enough cards in the discard piles.
For a while, we had a lot of cards that only triggered if you had a certain number of cards in the discard pile, and we had these other cards that took cards out of your discard pile, and we thought that would be a really interesting interaction. But at the end, you just often, the game worked and it was strategic and stuff, but you just often look at your hand and it was like, man, these cards don't quite do what they say they do because I don't get to play with my toys.
Yeah, a lot of it is also, again, we began with all sorts of crazy things and we went through crazy things, but in the end, we chose what we felt was working the best. So, for example, there were cards that said, oh, you want 3 cards in your discard pile, and there were other ones that you want an empty discard pile. But in the end, we ended up with cards that did things in the discard pile. So they became these points where this does something while it's in the discard pile, and the boost is how you get rid of it, rather than having like 3 or 4 different mechanics which are sort of hinting around the same thing. We've got these very clear tensions, something which takes stuff out of the discard pile and boosts with it, and things which do things in the discard pile. Yeah, so I think we ended up in a good place, but it was a long development cycle.
This was quite a long journey.
Yeah, I think it's important, or it's very interesting, maybe for the listeners also to tell a little bit how we got there, because I think we started in a place where we said, okay, it would be very nice to use the discard pile as some sort of resource, make it matter more than it does in the base set, for example. And we are a group of 4 game designers. We all have different experiences and things we like, and everyone in the beginning, everyone was throwing their ideas into the set. So we started with maybe like 10 cards from everyone and tried to put them together, and every card and every designer tried to pull it into a certain direction, and in the end we ended somewhere in the beginning when we started with that expansion that was trying to do a lot, but something was missing at some point in time. So even we did not have enough cards in the discard pile to activate something, or they were not targets, and so. And at some point in time, we also said we need to change our design process a little bit, and someone needs to wear a hat for a certain expansion. Otherwise, we would pull it into too many different directions and never get to a coherent theme and working cards. So that was actually very surprising to me to see, because I've never worked on a 4-person design team before, and it was actually kind of a challenge for us to figure out the perfect way of working here.
Yeah, and I actually think we got a lot of value out of that first iteration. It was crazy, but the thing was that, and that sort of gets back to this philosophy of throw a lot of stuff and see what sticks. During that play, we very clearly identified what wasn't working. We need fuel, and we also identified a bunch of mechanics that we really liked, and we started to decide, make a philosophy about what was important to build stuff around. Um, and
Yeah, I think if there were fewer designers, we wouldn't have explored all those areas as well. Like I think that it was pretty clear these issues that came up that might have been obscured if there just hadn't been so much stuff piled on right in the beginning.
Yeah, so we really spread out a wide net, and then there's the process of sort of zooming in on where the good stuff is.
Yeah, I mean, it made some of the issues just immediately pop out, like the number of cards in the graveyard and turning off and on because of that right in the beginning, the lack of resources or the limitation on the number of resources that you had in the graveyard that came out early on. Those things I think
Yeah,
might have been more obscured down the line.
I think all my cards were like, oh, if you have 7 cards in your discard pile, you get to do this crazy thing. And someone else had made one that all the time makes you take card out of the discard pile. And I was like, my crazy things are never happening. So it was certainly an experience.
Yeah, I can remember when we played first with those cards, and I remember especially the ones from you, Christian, and they had these crazy effects, and I was super excited about them, and I tried to make them work in like 4 or 5 games in a row, and it was basically impossible, unfortunately.
I remember Richard was just like, yeah, I'll just play it as a 3 sneaky turn 1. I'm never going to make this happen anyway.
No. So,
all right.
what makes you excited about the Beyond Eternity, the Boost expansion? What's the part that makes you excited about this specific expansion? Before we maybe talk more about the Evolution one.
My favorite is actually something that came a bit late in the process, but these cards that do something while in the discard pile it's a quite cool design space. We ended up with 4 of them that do quite different things when they're in the discard pile. One is even a very strong creature that does something bad in the discard pile. I just think this is it's a very cool space and feels quite different from other stuff you've seen in the base game, for example.
didn't we have that stuff from the start? Like
Yeah.
I remember having. I thought we had the food monster or whatever that
Oh, yeah,
ended up
that's
being,
true.
and
That's true.
we
Well,
also
that was-
had like I think we bent over backwards to try to get that original card that could attack from your discard pile
Yes.
there.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
like
that was
sort of
was-
the poster child for this mechanic.
That's true. All right, you're correct. I think just maybe a bit later we identified sort of, hey, this is actually really cool. Let's do a few more of these.
We
Yeah.
definitely made it a focus.
Yeah, and also for replacing the cards that were the threshold cards, right? I mean, I think there was a time
Yeah,
specifically when we wanted that instead of if you have a certain number in your discard pile, then
yeah. None of those survived.
My favorite part is actually just the basic boost mechanic, especially when it's repeatable. Because the changing the power on the creatures is, to me, is incredibly interesting. Because you're looking turns ahead in your hand, and things you wouldn't think would survive, they can survive, and hunters that won't work, well, they will if they're boosted, and then but what if the opponent adds boost to theirs? Like, there's a lot of interesting ins and outs with the boost any mechanic.
And it kind of allows you to modify your cards in a way that was not possible before. I mean, just taking your favorite hunter from the base set, you can say, okay, I really like the shark dog. It's amazing, but it's only power 4. What if that was power 7? Well, here
Yeah,
you actually get to do that.
yeah.
So you can have kind of even more unique situations this way.
Yeah, it's quite nice, I think, and as Skaff says, it makes a good strategic landscape, and it's also I think appealing because uh, it's major in that way, but at the same time it's often subtle, like one power difference, and
Yeah,
uh,
can
and
make a
sort of
very big difference.
applying that subtlety to big effect is very satisfying.
Yeah, I think I agree, Richard. And in order to make this pop out even more, that these just +1 or +2 effects can really make a big difference, we introduced during the very end of the design process, we introduced those cards that care about certain power values. And I think that cards helped me to make boost even more impactful, because you have this card in your hand, and it gives you the plan you can work towards with smaller tiny steps with the boosting during the game, and then you can reap in the benefits later with this other card. And that's something that I really like, that you need to take into account different discard piles and creatures and stuff from various points in the game, and put them together into a long-term strategy. And I think the boost expansion, the Beyond Eternity expansion, does that really well.
It also, that's another way where when it's mixed with the base set, it's interesting because there's some cards in the base set that care about power values. So all of a sudden, you thought of it in a fixed way, but now with the boost cards, like sometimes you even want to boost your bonus card. Um, so
Yes, you can, like the Brainfly allows you to steal something with power 5 or more, so now you can boost your opponent up to power 5 and then play that to steal them. It's kind of cool. It allows you to play with your old toys in a different way.
Yeah, I think there are some really cool cards in the base set to combine with the boost expansion, with the Beyond Eternity expansion, because the base set already has a lot of interaction with the discard pile, allowing you to play cards from your own discard pile or from the opponent's discard pile. And I think if I could choose some cards, I would exactly know which ones I would put in there from the base set. Okay, cool. Shall we shift a little bit towards the Beyond Evolution expansion?
Sure,
And
sure.
what you like about this one?
So maybe we should just explain a little bit what it's all about.
Sure. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, of course. So Beyond Evolution is so where we said Beyond Eternity is kind of this very discard pile focused expansion, stuff that does stuff in the discard pile, takes stuff out with this boosting. The Beyond Evolution is a bit more like, here's a bunch of cool stuff. But it has two mechanical differences. So one is the actions. So this is a new trigger for abilities. And an action on a card is something, so you can use it, normally you can use your turn to play a card or attack with a card, but the actions allow you to use your turn to do the action that is printed on a card you have in play. So if you have one that says action, the opponent discards a card, every turn you can just use that and make them discard a card. And this is something that's quite a nice design tool for us in general. So I think this is one we'll be even using going forward. So not just having it restricted here, because you can put a lot of cool effects on these actions. And then the other mechanical thing is a bit more flashy one, which is the evolutions, which is also where the names comes from. So there are a couple of cards. There are currently 4 cards that can evolve. So as a child, I played a lot of the Pokemon trading card game. And this is something I thought would be a lot of fun to see in Mindbug, to have creatures that work a bit different. So here you have some creatures that have an action on them that does something cool. So it could be maybe defeat an enemy with power 4 or less and evolve into this other creature. And then that one can do something else and evolve into a third creature that isn't just really powerful. So the first stage, you shuffle that into your deck, and the stage 2 and 3, you have them printed on the front and back of the card that is set aside at the beginning of the game. This is kind of nice, so you don't accidentally shuffle it into your deck because it has the creature on the front and the back. And a fun part about the evolutions is when they play, you have to decide if you mindbug them or not, just like the regular rules. So in the beginning, they are quite small, so maybe you don't want to mindbug them, but quite quickly they can become very big and scary. And then you'll be like, damn, I wish I mindbugged that. So this is sort of the fun part about the evolutions. And of course, it allows us to do over-the-top powerful cards, because you have to do some work to actually get them to do that totally crazy thing. But I'm all about having these crazy powerful cards.
Yeah, one thing that I remember about designing the cards for this set is we really early started to play around with actions. Even before we thought about this as a new mechanic for this expansion, and it was
already when we were doing the base set, right? We
Yes.
were talking about expansions, like in the end we decided not to put them in there, but they could have been.
Yeah, and what I found funny, we came up with like I don't know the exact number, but let's say 10 or so in the beginning action cards, and I found the variants of those cards super interesting because some of the ones we designed, of course, we had in mind we want to make strong and powerful cards, and some were super interesting and powerful, but others they sounded powerful, but they didn't deliver at all in our early designs because we somehow underestimated how much it actually costs to give up your entire turn to activate the creature. So while some of the effects sounded really powerful, they actually were not worth activating the card, or you didn't have the time to activate them because your opponent was already pushing pressure on you, and with just having 3 life, I don't know, like if the opponent puts pressure on you with a frenzy card, you don't have much time to activate stuff, you know. So it was quite difficult to design them in a way that they are fun and exciting.
It's also tricky because they are repeatable. So if you make them too strong, like if you make one that says as an action the opponent discards 3 cards, then probably you just do that every turn and you win quite quickly. So somehow they should be worth doing sometimes, but not always. And this was quite different from stuff we had designed before.
I think.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of design philosophy there, like because you say that people might be interested in that. So yeah, actions were. I mean, I think maybe the first time I ever played Mindbug, or immediately afterward, I think action cards were discussed. It seems like a very obvious thing to do. So then, right. So then the process there is like, okay, well, you could throw in 1 or 2, but wouldn't it be cooler if you saved up a bunch and revealed them all at once and then made a theme out of it? And so that's the reason they got shipped off to their own expansion. It like somehow it makes it a little more exciting when you can coalesce them and have it become a theme.
Yeah, it also lessened the complexity a bit on the initial set, that there was not this one additional rule you had to learn for maybe only 3 cards with an action.
Right.
I remember that one thing that solved it for me, or maybe that was one of the first cards that we had that worked really well. It was formerly called the Undead Tree. Now it's become the Dragon Inn, and maybe still my favorite card in the set. It is one thing about it that helps the action make it work is giving it tough, the creature, so that you, even if you are under pressure, you can at least block once and still get the chance to activate it without falling too far behind. And the second thing we did to the card is we had some kind of check on the card so that you're not able to activate it all the time. So the specific card, it requires you to have control fewer creatures than the opponent. Otherwise, you lose a life when it's activated. But it gives your opponent some. It's a super interesting effect. It's powerful, but it gives your opponent an out. So that was kind of a very interesting card that I remember early in the design process of this expansion.
Yeah, it's a fun card. I'm always scared to see now when I'm playtesting. So it's like, because the opponent has to have fewer creatures than me, and of course I cannot change that by playing more creatures. So I actually have to defeat this guy, but then he's also tough. So it's certainly a scary one.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about the playtesting. So this time around, as people may know, we're also working on a digital version of Mindbug, and this was actually a huge help for us in the playtesting here. So having a digital version, we are able to playtest with people who are not in the same location, have it rules enforced, so it's a very smooth experience. A game is very quick to play digitally, and it allows us to playtest with a broad set of testers. So we have a group of, I don't know how many, maybe 20, 30 testers that are interested in coming on, playing around with new cards, voicing their opinions. And I mean, doing this stuff in person would take a long time, but now we can just schedule one evening and play for a few hours. Everyone's playing, everyone's discussing, and I feel just like one evening moves us what would have taken like 1 month or something physically.
Yeah, I think we should take maybe a minute here or so to really thank our playtesters, because not only did they spend the time, I think the input that they gave us is invaluable. They are so smart people in our playtesting group, and I mean, they were super helpful in figuring out things that didn't work well, and not just playing the game so that we need to figure out all of that ourselves. They really pointed us into the right direction, and I think it's just a huge part of how good the expansions are today belongs to them.
Yeah, so playtesting digitally is definitely like a huge value for us going forward. And of course, as we open up this digital client more and more, the player base in there will just grow.
Yeah, for sure. So, what is it that excites you the most about the Evolution expansion?
I mean, for me, it's the evolutions. So it's just getting these big crazy creatures, attacking, defending, all that stuff is it's something I really like. Each of them works a bit differently. So some are playing with taking the opponent's whole hand away, or killing them directly, defeating all the creatures, or each one goes kind of into its own direction.
There is. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah. For me, it's the actions. As Marvin mentioned, we had been working on the actions for a long time, and getting them in the right place was such a natural mechanic, and one that I wanted to see. But we were wide off the mark at the start, and through the development process here, I think they've hit a really good spot. And there's a lot of actions that feel very exciting, but not something that I want to do every turn. And in particular, they integrate well with the evolutions.
I personally, I don't know why. I mean, I also like the evolutions and the actions a lot, but somehow I think the set has super interesting hunters.
Oh, really?
That's yeah. Maybe I really, maybe I cannot even explain it. I think we have a lot of hunters that have kind of the same power levels also, but we have very good targets for them. So I think it's super interesting. For example, at what point in time do I need to take out one of those evolution creatures? So can I afford to let it evolve 1 or 2 times, or do I need to take care of it right away? And also these that's the same is true for action cards. So how much effort should I put into getting rid of them by hunting them? And if they are tough or so, do I need to spend my turns now to get rid of them or later? And one card that's that's particularly true for that card is the radioactive rabbit, which I think is that explains pretty much what I like to do. I want to have a long-term plan, and that's what the radioactive rabbit is for. I mean, it's a card that you give to your opponent when you play it, but when you then later get the chance to defeat it, all of the the enemy creatures are defeated. And I think that is really interesting to try to sneak out a hunter at some point of time, and then later play this radioactive rabbit and have a super strong board wipe. And all of this together makes make the hunters more interesting in this set than in the others for me.
Yeah. Also, all the hunters have kind of abilities that, I mean, in general, strategically in Mindbug, it's very nice to have a hunter at the beginning of the game, but all of them have abilities that are very strong, but that shine a bit later. So some of them are good if the opponent has a lot of creatures, for example. So you don't really want to play that in the beginning. So this kind of design gives a bit extra dilemma to when exactly you play out those hunters.
Yeah, or they deal damage to the opponent depending on the number of mind bugs they have.
Yeah,
that one is very, very difficult to find the right time to play it, because
if you play it in the beginning, they probably mind bug it and you lose 2 life already, and they have a hunter in play. So
exactly.
probably also you want to wait a bit until maybe you spend your mind bugs.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still that's again the same direction. It gives me kind of a plan. So if I have that card, maybe I'm going to mind bug a little bit more aggressive, because I can. It makes it easier for me to play the hunter afterwards.
Yes, it's an interesting observation with the hunters, and something which I found interesting with these projects, which is the vanilla cycle you've got there with big creatures versus sneaky creatures versus hunters and poison. Where that balance is, there's not a single formula for getting that all right. My impression with the base set was often you ended up with a lot of um, dancing around the sneaky creatures until somebody couldn't stop one. But when we were experimenting with the discard set, what's it called?
Beyond Eternity.
Beyond Eternity, when we were working with that, started seeing a lot more games, one with big creatures who were being held at bay by these poison creatures, and so this dynamic became very interesting. And now here with the hunters, sort of having a different role, not just getting rid of sneaky creatures, which is sort of their traditional roles, but also nipping problems in the bud.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's usually something that is emergent. It's not really something that we plan for, that this time it should be the big creatures versus the poisonous creatures. But when you give these creatures a bit of different abilities, it just pushes stuff a bit in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
Which is indeed pretty fun.
Yeah, it's funny that you called it the discard expansion. There is a lot of discard in it, because we haven't even mentioned that yet, I don't think, up till now. We've talked about the actions and the evolutions, but there's also discard theirs too. So
that's true. There's actually a lot of discard in the Beyond Evolution expansion.
Yeah.
So just for the people watching, these titles are fairly new. So until like a few weeks ago, we just always called them the action expansion and the discard expansion, where the discard expansion was the one that interacted with the discard pile with all this boosting and stuff. So that's why every time we say the title, we're like, I really like the Beyond Evolution.
Yeah, that's the discard pile expansion, as opposed to discard as an action. And there's a decent amount of discard in the Beyond Evolution expansion.
Yes, well said.
And
just a little bit behind the curtain info here for the people watching.
And actually, that to me, I don't think I've ever played yet the 2 new expansions with each other. I will point out there's a lot of interactions between those two. That's pretty interesting.
Yes.
Because the boost really makes the hunting ecosystem is changed a lot by the boost, with things going up in power, both the target and the hunter changing power. There's again several cards in the evolution expansion which mention specific power levels. There's at least 3. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
there's that. So again, that interacts with the boost, and then of course there's more discard in that, which again makes the discard mechanics in the previous expansion also more interesting. So I don't know. There's a lot going on there specifically between those 2 expansions interacting.
There really is, and there will be also a lot of interactions that we didn't really plan for. So this will also be a lot of fun for us as designers to discover.
Okay, is there any other specific topic that you would like to address?
Maybe one final thing is we didn't mention, but when we talked about new expansions, we also discussed components. So, like, should a Mindbug expansion always just consist of cards? This time, with the evolutions, we've challenged that a little bit. We have these special cards that have creatures on the front and back, which is a little bit different. But in the future, do you think a Mindbug expansion could be something more than cards, or is cards always just the way to go?
Well, I like the simplicity of trying to minimize the amount of equipment, and that certainly may be a core value to some of the players. But I also like a lot of the design space that's opened up by allowing some extra components, and so. Yeah, I like both. I'm probably going to push for getting some counters in or something at some point.
All right, so just a little teaser there for the future.
I actually also like both. I like the simplicity of cards on one side, but also the kind of stuff you can do with additional components. So I could also see using cards for different things in the future. I mean, we have used them at the moment just for creatures and the mind bugs. But I mean, there could be other stuff in the future, and we will definitely try to explore these different areas. Not sure if anything of that will ever come to life, but as a designer, it's just super fun to play around with those things.
And I think in these 2 expansions, we really have explored sort of the weird ways you can use cards, like sticking them underneath other cards to count as +1, or turning them into other cards by evolving. It's certainly doing some stuff we didn't do in the base game.
Well, if I look at other card games that some of us in this room here have designed, you could also flip cards above the table and see where on which other cards they land. So there's still some room for for designing new cards here.
Yeah, you want to do a card flip expansion, Richard?
Yeah, sure.
Why not? Okay. Shall we call it a day?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to say Richard designed those things because he didn't have to judge any tournaments. He was free. He was free to design crap like that.
And that will probably also be the case here, right?
Yeah, probably. And I really like that. Pushing the limits is it's always good for those kind of games, I think. I mean, we could still do that kind of stuff as promo cards, you know.
That's true. That's
where we allow us to be a little bit more crazy than usual.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fun.
But before we close, I want to bring one friend. And in the last session, I had this little mind bug here that my wife made for me, and I want to give his I don't know, little brother or sister the chance to appear here as well, because we have just awesome fans and awesome friends. And one of my best friends made this little Lego mind bug for me for Christmas, which is completely designed by himself,
That's really cool.
Built by himself, and I think it's just an awesome piece of art that I wanted to give the chance to appear here in this.
Yeah, maybe those can be for an expansion.
Yeah.
Get so 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah, that would be cool.
You could use them as life counters, or probably as mind bugs would be better.
It would make the game a little bit less portable than it is at the moment, but
it's on the Kickstarter version.
Yeah, what I have to say is I think there is still a lot of stuff we can explore with the Mindbag, and I'm really looking forward to continue working on it with all of you.
Likewise, Marvin. It's been a pleasure.
Great.
Thanks a lot for the session today, and see you soon.
All right, bye.
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 Bye.